I never expected my life would take such a dramatic turn on a random Tuesday night in October. You know those moments when everything changes in an instant? This was definitely one of those. Let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Alex, and I've been living in the Oakwood apartments for about 3 years now. It's a modest complex, nothing fancy, but it has character. Exposed brick walls, large windows that let in just the right amount of sunlight, and neighbors who actually know each other's names. That's becoming increasingly rare in our disconnected world, isn't it? I've always been comfortable with who I am, a 28-year-old gay man with a decent job in graphic design, a small circle of close friends, and a penchant for late-night documentary binges. My apartment had become my sanctuary, a place where I could truly be myself without judgment or pretense. The neighborhood itself is this perfect blend of urban convenience and community feel. We have block parties in the summer, and during the holidays, the entire complex transforms into this magical display of lights and decorations. It's the kind of place where people actually check on each other during snowstorms. And then there's Jake. Jake moved into the apartment next door about a year ago. He's the kind of guy who turns heads without even trying. Tall with broad shoulders, perpetually tousled dark hair, and the kind of smile that makes you forget what you were saying mid-sentence. From the moment he helped me carry groceries up the stairs on moving day, I knew I was in trouble, but I also knew he was straight. He mentioned his girlfriend, Melissa, within the first 5 minutes of our conversation, and I watched them together at community gatherings, his arm casually draped around her shoulders, their easy laughter a reminder of boundaries I shouldn't cross. Over the months, Jake and I developed what I'd call a comfortable, neighborly friendship. We'd exchange pleasantries in the hallway, occasionally grab a beer at the local pub when we ran into each other, and help each other out with small favors, feeding pets during weekends away, lending tools for minor repairs, that sort of thing. I was careful to keep my attraction to him buried deep, treating it as nothing more than an inconvenient crush that would eventually fade. After all, we've all been there, right? Developing feelings for someone unattainable is practically a rite of passage. It was around midnight when I heard the knock. I remember checking the time on my phone and wondering who could possibly be at my door at this hour. I was already in my pajamas, hair damp from a shower, halfway through a documentary about deep-sea creatures. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I peered through the peephole and felt my heart skip a beat. Jake was standing there, looking nothing like his usual confident self. His hair was a mess, and not in the carefully styled way it usually was. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he was shifting his weight from one foot to the other like he couldn't stand still. When I opened the door, the scent of rain and faint whiskey hit me. "Hey," he said, his voice hoarse. "I know it's late. I'm sorry." There was something so vulnerable in his expression that I immediately stepped aside to let him in. He hesitated for just a moment before crossing the threshold, bringing with him the energy of someone carrying a heavy burden. "Everything okay?" I asked, though it was obvious things were far from okay. Jake ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up even more. "Melissa and I had a fight," he said, pacing a small circle in my living room. "A bad one. I think we might be done." I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. But the larger part of me genuinely ached seeing him so distressed. "Do you want to talk about it?" I offered, gesturing toward my couch. Jake sank down onto it, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "Not really," he mumbled. Then he looked up at me with those intense eyes that always seemed to see more than I wanted them to. "I know this is weird, but can I crash here tonight? I can't go back there right now, and the thought of a hotel just feels so lonely." I finished for him. He nodded, relief washing over his features. "Yeah, lonely." There was a moment of silence between us, filled with unspoken questions and the gentle hum of my refrigerator in the background. "Of course you can stay," I said finally. "I'll grab you some blankets for the couch." Jake's shoulders relaxed visibly. "Thanks, Alex. I owe you one." If only he knew how many times I'd imagined him in my apartment late at night, though never quite like this, never with this cloud of sadness hanging over him. As I rummaged through my linen closet for spare blankets and a pillow, my mind raced with possibilities and warnings. This was dangerous territory. Having Jake here, vulnerable and seeking comfort, was testing boundaries I'd carefully maintained for a year. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that he needed a friend right now, not someone complicating things with unwanted feelings. When I returned to the living room, Jake had taken off his jacket and shoes, making himself look slightly more at home than I was prepared for. The couch pulls out into a bed, I explained, setting down the pile of linens. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it's better than nothing. Jake stood up to help me pull out the sofa bed, and in the small space, our arms brushed against each other. I felt that familiar jolt of electricity that I'd become so adept at ignoring. Want to talk about what happened? I asked again, focusing on smoothing the fitted sheet over the mattress. Jake was quiet for a moment, tucking in his side of the sheet with more care than necessary. It's been building for a while, he finally said. Tonight was just the breaking point, I guess. He sat down on the edge of the now-made bed, staring at his hands. She says I'm emotionally unavailable, that I never let her in, that she feels like she's dating a wall sometimes. I sat down beside him, careful to leave appropriate space between us. Are you, I asked gently, emotionally unavailable? Jake looked at me then, really looked at me, with an intensity that made my breath catch. I don't think so, he said slowly. I think I'm just unavailable to her. And I don't know why. The implications of his words hung in the air between us, creating a tension that was almost tangible. I cleared my throat, trying to maintain my role as the supportive friend. Relationships are complicated, I offered lamely. Sometimes the chemistry just isn't there, even when you want it to be. Jake nodded, seeming lost in thought. Yeah, but we've been together for 2 years. Shouldn't I know by now if the chemistry is there? He ran a hand through his hair again, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. And the thing is, I do care about her. I don't want to hurt her. But lately, I've been feeling. He trailed off, apparently unable to find the right words. Restless, I suggested. Like something's missing? He looked at me with surprise, as if I'd read his mind. Exactly. How did you know? I shrugged, trying to appear casual while my heart hammered in my chest. Just a guess. I've been there before. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken thoughts filling the space between us. Finally, I stood up, needing to create some distance. You should get some rest, I said. Everything looks worse at midnight. Things might be clearer in the morning. Jake nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Thanks again, Alex. Not just for the couch, but for listening. I managed to smile. That's what friends are for, right? The word friends felt both true and inadequate all at once. As I turned to head to my bedroom, Jake called my name. Alex. I looked back at him, standing there in my living room looking lost and uncertain. Yeah. He hesitated, then shook his head slightly. Nothing. Just good night. I nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach. Good night, Jake. I closed my bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. This was going to be a long night. Sleep eluded me as I lay in bed, acutely aware of Jake's presence just beyond my door. I could hear him moving around occasionally, the creak of the sofa bed, the sound of him sighing. I wondered what he was thinking, if he was replaying his fight with Melissa or contemplating what tomorrow would bring. Around 2 a.m., I heard my refrigerator door open and close, followed by the sound of a glass being filled. Unable to resist, I got up and padded quietly to the kitchen. Jake was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights, a glass of water in his hand. He was wearing just a t-shirt and boxers, his long legs bare in the moonlight filtering through the blinds. He turned when he heard me enter, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. Couldn't sleep? I asked, moving to get myself a glass of water as well. Jake shook his head. Too many thoughts. He took a sip of his water, then set the glass down on the counter. I keep thinking about what you said earlier, about chemistry. I leaned against the opposite counter, trying to maintain a casual posture despite the intimacy of the moment. Both of us barely dressed, in a darkened kitchen in the middle of the night. What about it? Jake's gaze was steady, more certain than it had been earlier. I've been wondering if maybe the reason things don't work with Melissa is because the chemistry is somewhere else. My heart began to race, but I forced myself to stay calm. What do you mean? Jake took a step toward me, then stopped, as if catching himself. I don't know exactly. That's the problem. I just know something doesn't feel right, and hasn't for a while. I nodded, trying to be the supportive friend he needed. It's okay not to have all the answers, Jake. Sometimes figuring out what you don't want is the first step to understanding what you do want. He smiled then, a small but genuine smile that made my heart flip. When did you get so wise? I laughed softly. I'm not wise. Just experienced in the art of confusion. We stood there for a moment, smiling at each other in the dim light, and something shifted between us, a new understanding, perhaps, or the acknowledgement of a connection that had been there all along. We ended up sitting at my small kitchen table, talking for hours as the night deepened around us. Jake told me about his childhood in a small Midwestern town, how he'd always felt like he was playing a role rather than living his life. I shared stories about my coming-out journey, the freedom and fear that came with embracing my true self. We discovered shared passions for obscure indie bands and foreign films, laughing as we tried to outdo each other with our knowledge of cult classics. It was the kind of conversation that flows effortlessly, where hours pass like minutes and you feel like you're discovering a person for the first time, even if you've known them for years. I've never talked to Melissa like this, Jake admitted around 4 a.m., his voice tinged with wonder and something like guilt. We talk about work, about what to have for dinner, about which show to watch, but never like this. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded, trying not to read too much into his words. But then he reached across the table and placed his hand over mine, just for a moment. Thank you, he said simply. The warmth of his touch lingered long after he pulled away. Just as we were considering the merits of trying to get a few hours of sleep before dawn, Jake's phone rang, shattering the intimate bubble we'd created. He looked at the screen, his expression darkening. It's Melissa, he said, his voice tight. I stood up, giving him privacy. I'll be in my room if you need me. I offered, but he caught my wrist as I passed. Stay, he said softly. Please. So I sat back down as he answered the call, putting it on speaker, a gesture of trust that wasn't lost on me. Melissa's voice filled the kitchen, tinny through the phone speaker, but unmistakably upset. Where are you? She demanded without preamble. Jake closed his eyes briefly. I'm at a friend's place. I needed some space. There was a pause, then, is it that guy? Your neighbor? The way she said it, with such disdain, made me flinch. Jake's jaw tightened. His name is Alex, and yes, he was kind enough to let me crash on his couch. Melissa's laugh was harsh. I bet he was. You know he has a thing for you, right? Everyone can see it. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and shame. Jake glanced at me, his expression unreadable. That's not fair, Melissa, he said evenly. Alex is a friend. And even if what you're saying was true, which it isn't, it wouldn't matter. He's been there for me tonight, which is more than I can say for you. The silence that followed was deafening. When Melissa spoke again, her voice was cold. You need to decide what you want, Jake. Because I'm done waiting for you to figure it out. Come home in the morning, or don't come home at all. The call ended abruptly, leaving us in stunned silence. I couldn't look at Jake, mortified by Melissa's accusation and afraid of what I might see in his eyes. Alex, he said finally, look at me. Reluctantly, I raised my gaze to meet his. Instead of the disgust or discomfort I feared, I saw only gentle curiosity. Is she right? He asked quietly. Do you have feelings for me? The moment stretched between us, a tightrope of truth I wasn't sure I was brave enough to walk. But something about the night, the confessions, the connection, the way Jake was looking at me now, gave me courage. Yes, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I have since you moved in. But I never would have acted on it, Jake. I respect you too much for that. Jake nodded slowly, processing my words. Then he did something I never expected. He reached across the table and took my hand again, this time interlacing our fingers. I think, he said carefully, that might be part of why things aren't working with Melissa. Because lately, all I can think about is you. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. What are you saying, Jake? He squeezed my hand, his eyes never leaving mine. I'm saying I don't know what this is exactly, but I want to find out. If you do too. The world seemed to narrow to just this moment. Just us, everything else falling away. What about Melissa? I asked, needing to be sure he wasn't making a rash decision in the emotional aftermath of their fight. Jake sighed. It's been over for a while, we just haven't admitted it. Tonight just made it official. We stayed like that, hands linked across my kitchen table, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside. Neither of us seemed to know what to do next, caught in this new and fragile understanding. Finally, Jake stood, still holding my hand, and gently pulled me to my feet. We stood facing each other, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I don't know what I'm doing, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. I've never felt this way about a man before, but I know that being with you tonight, talking with you, feels more right than anything has in a long time. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, Jake raised his free hand to my face, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made my breath catch. "Is this okay?" he whispered. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. And then he was leaning in, closing the distance between us, and his lips were on mine, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence as I responded. It was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd expected, better, realer, filled with a year's worth of unspoken longing. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Jake rested his forehead against mine. "Wow," he murmured, a smile in his voice. "Yeah," I agreed, feeling dazed and elated all at once. "Wow." We made our way to the couch, neither of us quite ready for more, but unwilling to be separated. We sat close, Jake's arm around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest, talking softly as the room gradually brightened with the new day. At some point, exhaustion caught up with us, and we drifted off to sleep together, tangled in each other's arms. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing with a text message. Jake was still asleep, his face peaceful in a way I'd never seen before. Carefully, I extracted myself from his embrace and checked my phone. It was from my friend Rachel. "Brunch today? Need to vent about my date last night." I texted back a quick, "Can't today, we'll explain later," and put my phone on silent. As I looked back at Jake, I found him awake, watching me with those intense eyes. "Morning," he said, his voice husky with sleep. "Morning," I replied, suddenly shy in the light of day. "Sleep okay?" Jake stretched, his t-shirt riding up to reveal a strip of tanned skin that I tried not to stare at. "Better than I have in months," he admitted. There was an awkward moment as reality began to intrude on the magic of the night before. "So," I said, not knowing how to proceed. "So," Jake echoed, sitting up straighter. "I should probably go talk to Melissa. End things properly." My heart sank a little, even though I knew it was the right thing to do. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Take whatever time you need." Jake reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers again in a gesture that was quickly becoming familiar. "Hey," he said gently. "I meant what I said last night. All of it. This isn't just a reaction to my fight with Melissa or a one-time thing for me. I want to see where this goes. With you." The sincerity in his eyes was impossible to doubt. I squeezed his hand, relief washing over me. "I want that too," I said simply. He smiled, that heart-stopping smile that had captivated me from the beginning. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere, except temporarily to deal with this situation." After Jake left, promising to come back as soon as he could, I found myself pacing my apartment, replaying every moment of the night before. Had it really happened? Had Jake, my straight neighbor Jake, really kissed me? Had he really said he wanted to explore a relationship with me? It seemed too good to be true, like a dream I might wake from at any moment. I cleaned my apartment to keep busy, changed the sheets on the sofa bed, took a long shower. And all the while, doubts crept in. What if Jake changed his mind once he saw Melissa? What if this was just a momentary confusion, a product of their fight and his emotional state? Hours passed with no word from Jake. I checked my phone obsessively, typing and deleting messages, not wanting to seem needy but desperate for reassurance. By late afternoon, I was convinced I'd never see him again, that he'd reconciled with Melissa and was too embarrassed to tell me. I was contemplating calling Rachel after all, needing a distraction, when there was a knock at my door. My heart leapt to my throat as I hurried to answer it. Jake stood there, looking exhausted but somehow lighter than he had the night before. "Hi," he said simply. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, afraid to ask what had happened. Jake moved past me into the living room, then turned to face me. "It's done," he said. "Melissa and I are over." I nodded, still cautious. "How did she take it?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of frustration. "Not well at first. There was yelling, crying, accusations. But eventually, she admitted she's been unhappy too. We just weren't right for each other." I moved closer to him, still maintaining a small distance. "And how are you feeling?" Jake considered the question seriously. "Sad," he admitted. 2 years is a long time, and I do care about her. But also relieved, like I can finally breathe again." He closed the distance between us, taking both my hands in his. "And excited," he added, his voice dropping lower. About this. About us. The last of my doubts melted away as he pulled me into his arms, his kiss more confident now, certain in a way he hadn't been the night before. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of discovery. Jake moved in with a friend temporarily while he sorted out his living situation with Melissa. We took things slow physically, both of us navigating unfamiliar territory. Me, because I'd never been with someone just coming to terms with their sexuality. Jake, because everything about being with a man was new to him. But emotionally, we dove in head first, spending every free moment together, talking late into the night, learning each other's stories and secrets. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. Jake struggled with telling his family and friends about us, fear of their reactions keeping him silent longer than either of us would have liked. There were moments of doubt, times when he questioned if he was making the right choice, if he was truly bisexual or just confused. And I had my own insecurities, wondering if I was just an experiment for him, if he would eventually decide he preferred women after all. But for every difficult moment, there were a dozen beautiful ones. The first time Jake introduced me as his boyfriend to a coworker. The night he finally told his parents about us, and their surprised but ultimately supportive response. The morning I woke up to find him making breakfast in my kitchen, singing off-key to the radio. Looking so at home it made my heart ache with happiness. The first time we made love, clumsy and perfect all at once, Jake's wonder and desire erasing any lingering doubts I had about his feelings for me. 3 months after that fateful midnight knock, Jake's lease with Melissa officially ended. We were sitting on my couch, our couch now, really, since he spent most nights there anyway, discussing his options. I could get my own place, he was saying, scrolling through apartment listings on his phone. There's a decent studio a few blocks from here. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. Or, I suggested, trying to sound casual, you could just stay here. Officially. Jake looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. Are you asking me to move in with you, Alex? I nodded, suddenly nervous. If it's too soon, I understand. But you're here most of the time anyway, and it seems silly to pay rent on another place when. Jake cut me off with a kiss, his phone forgotten as he pulled me close. Yes, he said against my lips. Yes, I'll move in with you. Relief and joy flooded through me. Really? Jake laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way I'd come to love. Really? There's nowhere else I'd rather be. The day Jake officially moved in, bringing his few boxes of possessions from his friend's place, was one of the happiest of my life. We spent the evening rearranging furniture to make space for his things, arguing good-naturedly about where his movie posters should go, laughing as we tried to fit his clothes into my already crowded closet. As we collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but content, Jake pulled me against his side, pressing a kiss to my temple. Thank you, he said softly. For what? I asked, looking up at him. His eyes were serious, full of emotion. For opening your door that night. For giving me a place in your bed. For helping me find myself. I reached up to touch his face, still sometimes amazed that I could, that this wasn't just a dream. Thank you for having the courage to knock, I replied. Jake smiled, that smile that still made my heart skip a beat. Best decision I ever made, he said, and leaned down to kiss me. As his lips met mine, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Sometimes the most unexpected midnight visitors can change your life in ways you never imagined possible. And sometimes, just sometimes, they stay for good. Total _char_count, 18,756.